Good morning, everyone. Thank you for finding the time to join us today. My name is Rinske Lichtendaal. I'm a marketing executive at Vonk, and I'm the moderator of today's webinar. Today we host the webinar, I've Got an EVP, Now What? Our speakers of today are two specialists in the field of employer branding and recruitment marketing, and they will introduce themselves later on. But first, there are a couple of things I would like to share with you regarding the house rules. As a participant, you are muted, which means we cannot hear you. But when you have any questions, please ask them by using the chat box in the panel on the right side. At the end of the webinar, we'll try our best to answer all your questions, but in the case we run out of time, you will receive the answers on the remaining questions in your mailbox. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded, and you will receive the recording in your mailbox as well. And now I'll give the floor to our speakers of today, Esther and Martin.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Rinske. Hi, everyone. Great to have you all here, and thanks for joining. So before we start off with the webinar, we want to kick off with a quick video, just to get everyone on the same page, and also give you a bit of a smile on your face.
This is another generic recruitment video. Let us begin. Do you see these doors? These are office doors. They lead to a corridor, which leads to an office full of people walking and talking to each other. This probably means they are busy. Deep in thought, he gazes beyond the horizon. If he chewed on a pencil, the shot would be more dramatic. You see? Let's cut to a stylish conference room full of people, emphatic waving of arms, while teammates listen intently. You can almost taste the dedication. Here comes token longboard bro. His workplace is just like him, super fun and laid back. Let this oversized quote in a common area inspire you. Here's a cool idea written in dry erase marker on a glass wall. Witness the positivity this arrow conveys, because it is pointing up. Okay, all right, hold on, stop.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here, so I hope everybody got the point. It was a bit of a laugh about recruitment, marketing, and what we're seeing these days. So I think everybody gets the point. Employee branding is a topic that everyone has been talking about for quite some time. And we see a lot of employer branding efforts being made out there, some better than others. But why is everyone talking about it? And how do you make sure you get it right? This webinar is all about how to make sure your employer branding comes alive. Having an EVP or your employer branding video on your website will not make all the data engineers, software developers, or auditors come run to you. So with this webinar, we want to give you the building blocks and at least the first steps on how to start activating and bringing alive your employer brand. But let's first start with a small introduction so you at least know who you're talking to.
So welcome guys. First and foremost, we are really thrilled that you have chosen to spend the upcoming 30 to 35 minutes to listen to our webinar. So first, a quick introduction from our end. I will kick it off. My name is Martin de Ruiter and I work as an account director at Vonk. I am responsible for helping our European customer base with their recruitment marketing and employer brand activation campaigns. I've been with Vonk for almost 6 years now, and I'm mainly dealing with educating and helping our customer base to better attract talent by making smart use of online data and recruitment marketing. Next to me is Esther van Schijndel, who is going to introduce herself now.
Yeah, hi everyone. So now my name is Esther van Schijndel. I've been with Vonk for about 2 years and working in Team International, same team as Martin. Before I joined Vonk, I worked at ING, the Orange Bank, in the global branding department. So I have a bit of a branding background. And this was also the first time I got in contact with employer branding, where I was in a project where I helped develop their whole new strategy, from doing research in 12 countries to eventually translating them to external campaigns for several audiences, like their traineeship and IT audiences. So this is also one of the reasons why I'm involved in this webinar.
So the agenda of today, the agenda is focused on 3 main topics. The first one is really about the why. Why should you why should you even bother building an EVP and thinking of employer branding campaigns? What is the purpose in all of this, and why is it becoming more and more important? During the second agenda topic, Esther will briefly touch upon the actual difference between an EVP and employer branding and also highlight the decision-making process of a potential candidate. The third agenda point is more about the activation side of employer branding, the actual campaigning. During this agenda point, Esther and I will make sure to provide you with a step-by-step plan to actually start activating your employer brand in an efficient and effective way.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Back to the basics. So there are many reasons why employer branding is important. And of course, there are many researchers out there showing how it will benefit your company, your return on investment on the long term. But for today, we want to zoom into two trends that we feel that are very important to briefly touch upon, because these two also really affect the way you should activate your employer brand. And the first one has everything to do the way technology has fundamentally changed the way we communicate, but especially the way we search and perceive information. In the good old days, we could maybe choose from a couple channels from our TV or radio, and companies could easily reach anyone out there. However, this was only available for the biggest and richest companies out there. And for us, as a consumer, we didn't really have a choice in the matter. We got shown these messages whether we liked it or not. What we see nowadays is that the online world is getting bigger and more complex every day. And people have actually got a choice in which sources they want to use to get their information from news channels to reviews or even job boards. The way people find, search, and apply for jobs has changed. And our candidates are scattered over this huge online landscape. And this means we have to start looking differently at our candidates. For instance, a marketeer has different interests and online behavior than an IT developer, meaning they use different channels. And even within IT, there are many different types of candidates that maybe use different languages as a software developer, using Python, using Java. They each have own communities like Reddit, GitHub, and they're scattered. And especially looking at companies that are growing quickly, you have to keep track of many different candidates that you have and all their online behaviors. And it's changing rapidly every day. Imagine if you have to deal with even cross-border recruitment. So this is the first trend that is really affecting the way we should look at our employer brand, and especially how to activate it. And then there's a second one. And this has everything to do with the shift in the market, where I feel there's not even a war for talent anymore. Basically, talent has won. Either they are slowly disappearing, or you're currently fighting over the same ones. There are currently more vacancies online than there are qualified candidates. Next to your online vacancy, there are maybe 10 other companies or roles that your candidates can choose from. And this, of course, varies a lot across the different target audiences, whether it's IT, whether it's engineering or sales. But we are seeing that the active candidate is getting smaller, and the passive candidate is becoming more important across all sectors. The market has shifted, and not the companies have the picking, the candidates do. And this means two things for us. First, you have to start convincing the candidates why they should come work for you and not the other way around. Second, we have to focus more on passive candidates. And what we can see is that a passive candidate is fundamentally different. We know they are not actively looking for a job, meaning they're not active on job boards. So we have to look at different ways to reach them. We do know they're curious and open for an opportunity, but they already have a job and they're not in a hurry. And changing your job is not an easy decision to make. It's going to change their daily life, meaning their decision-making process takes longer. And we need to have a bit more convincing. So let's take a look at that decision-making process. The psychology behind it, exactly. Oh, sorry. So let's take a look at the brain and how that works. And this does not just apply for passive candidates, but basically to anyone deciding anything in the world. So imagine this. Do you know the feeling that when you have to make a really important decision in your life, and you ask your family and friends for advice. And everybody is telling you to pick a particular choice. And deep down, you know it would be the most realistic, but also the most responsible thing to do. But there's something telling you, and you don't know exactly what it is, to pick the other one. And against all odds and against all advices, you do. And that feeling is the part of the brain that's one of the most powerful places that can overrule any rational decision making. It's that part of the brain that controls emotions and relationships. And to make candidate choose us, we need to infiltrate that part of the brain. But how do we do that? Well, let's start with maybe speaking the same language and connecting to it not once, but multiple times. So let's plot this on a candidate. Research has shown that it takes about 8 to 12 touch points, and sometimes many more, before a candidate decides to apply. And then we're not talking about showing them 12 times the same vacancy. It's about quality touch points and guiding them through this whole funnel. Let's give you an example. So let's say you go on holiday and you want to book an hotel or an Airbnb. Probably the first hotel or apartment that pops up is not the one that you're going to book right away. You first want to orientate yourself, start comparing, read a bit, look at reviews, think it over, and you will probably take your time before actually booking it. And this is actually quite similar to what a candidate will go through. But imagine it being a much bigger decision. We see that this sometimes can take up 3 to 6 months with passive candidates. And of course, this again can vary a lot per target audience and even per candidate. But for us as a company, it means that we have to make sure that we are there during their decision-making process and guiding them through it. And when it comes to creating this candidate journey, let me tell you, there is not one holy grail. A lot of channels out there that will tell you, they will provide you with the best candidates. Indeed will tell you this, LinkedIn will tell you this. The thing is, it's not just about using one particular channel. It's about creating the seamless candidate journey and having a multi-channel approach. And you need to make sure that everything you do has a goal and is complementary to each other. And this way of thinking is funnel thinking. And what you see right here is the AIDA funnel. I think many of you guys will probably know it. It's one of the oldest marketing models out there, but it's still really relevant and applicable to the decision-making process. It's what every candidate will go through before applying. It's fairly simple. If people do not know you as a company, people are much less likely to consider you. If there are 6 jobs in front of them, 6 vacancies, they will most likely go for a company they already know. Please keep this model in mind because it will get back in this webinar in a later stage. Okay, let's take a look at our main concepts today. The employer value proposition and employer branding. So what we're not going to do today is we're not going to deep dive into how to create them or anything, but I do want to briefly remind you of the differences between the two concepts. Because the concepts of an employer branding value proposition and employer brand are used interchangeably. And while it's true that they are connected in many ways, they are actually separate entities. Your employer value proposition is basically your identity. As an employer, and it should be connected to your DNA. It's not just something you would like to be or make up. It should be based on reality. So a good research is a prerequisite before defining your EVP. It defines the values and principles you as an employer, but also your employees live by. It's what makes you as an employer. So if we would say that your EVP is your identity, then your employer brand is your image or your reputation. It's basically how you're truly seen. The thing is, your employer brand has always existed, whether you knew it or not. And your employer brand solely exists out of associations in the brain people have of your company. So the difficulty is, it's not something that you can change overnight, but you are able to influence it, but that takes time. And that's exactly what this webinar is about.
All right, thank you, Esther, for all the information provided. In the next part of this presentation, the upcoming 5 to 8 slides, we will deep dive into how to actually start activating and bringing alive your employer brand. So, first of all, activation of your employer brand. Why? Well, as soon as you defined your overall EVP and you've created some nice content, such as some videos that you've published on your careers website, this will not mean all candidates will appear on your career page all suddenly. Do you really think, for example, cloud engineers who need to speak 5 different languages will all know about you now? So the big news is you're not there yet. Of course, there will be audiences that know your brand. Let's take a very tangible example for everybody attending this webinar. Probably everybody knows ING and the fact that they are a bank. They might not have a lot of trouble hiring financials. However, when you're a software developer or a data engineer, will ING be one of the companies you consider to be your next employer? Therefore, nowadays, only relying on your career page and some own social channels, for example, to activate your employer brand isn't going to do it anymore. How will your key audiences find you and know about the opportunities that you offer them? You might have an amazing story and a great place to work, but it's essential to spread your story externally and let your audiences know about you. In the upcoming 5 slides, we have defined 5 simple steps into what's needed to start activating your employer brand. So, step 1. The first thing you need to do, in our opinion, you need to start defining your strategic audiences and tailor your employer brand message towards every audience. Every company will probably have many selling points why it's amazing to work there, but these selling points will most likely vary between different departments. They will be very different for marketing and sales if you compare it to, for example, engineering or IT. To give a brief example, for sales, it might be rewards and benefits that are most important, but for IT, it might be a flexible work environment and making an actual impact. Once you've defined your strategic target audiences and know what they find important, we can move on to step 2.
Okay, so the second step is all about content. You can put online anything you want on the best performing channels right in front of your target audience. But if it doesn't resonate or is in any way attractive for the target audience, it will be a lot of effort for nothing. Content is key in activating your employer brand. And when you start creating content for these types of audiences, the values you defined in the previous step for each target audience will be very important. Let's say that flexible work environment is important for IT. You can create a content piece around that. Make sure it's relevant and make sure it's about the candidate and not about you. There are many pieces of content you can think of. You can think about blogs, videos, webinars, and much more. So when you've created different content pieces for your target audiences, you need to start thinking about where you can reach your audience. So we can move on to step 3.
So the good news is talent nowadays is online all the time, and the online world is getting bigger and bigger every day. People nowadays tend to be online at least 4 hours per day via mobile, desktop, tablet devices, and on social media, Google, news-related websites, etc., etc. It really doesn't matter if you're an 18-year-old student or a 50-year-old software engineer. Everybody has their own daily media consumption, and therefore you can imagine different candidates have fundamental different behavior online. This is a big challenge at the one hand, but at the same time a great opportunity. It actually allows you as an employer to hyper-target your audiences. This is really important because you do not want to reach everyone, right? You only want to reach the right ones. So this step 3, is all about doing research where your specific target audiences are active. You can, for example, think about specific niche channels, bespoke communities, social media channels, or for example, niche job boards. In case you have no clue where to start, a tip from our end, start asking your own workforce.
Okay, step 4. So step 4 is basically, this is all about bringing the previous steps together. You've created the content, you've done the research on where your audiences are active. Now you have to start planning when, what, and where to spread it. You need to create a plan for every target audience. And when doing this, it's really important to know that every medium and every content piece has a different purpose. For instance, channels like YouTube or social media, they work perfectly for spreading your story, but they do not work as well when trying to get people to apply. So you can imagine that, for instance, people that are active on Facebook or on Instagram, 80% of those people are mobile users and probably on their way to work or in the train. People do not tend to apply via their mobile or when they're in a rush. So as mentioned before, it will not work if you solely use a bit of social media or a bit of Google. It's about creating a seamless candidate journey and making sure that everything you do has a purpose and is complementary to each other. So when creating your plan, we're ready for the final step.
Yeah, thank you, Esther. So in the meantime, we've reached the last step, step 5, which might even be, in my opinion, the most important one. So when talking about recruitment marketing and executing recruitment marketing campaigns without data and tracking, it's kind of like a professional sports team playing a really important match and not evaluate afterwards to see how they can improve for the upcoming season to come. It's like shooting in the dark. It's super crucial to measure the effect of your campaign so you're able to optimize and steer towards success. Doing this will actually give you insights into how your target audiences are reacting to your employer brand and your campaign efforts, and what you can do to improve moving forward. As you can see in this slide, we'd like to highlight some data points that are relevant to collect to actually measure the return on investment coming from your employer branding campaigning. Hereby you can think of website visitors, for example, vacancy views, or for example, quantity or quality of applications coming from the employer branding strategy.
Thank you guys. So we've gone through all the 5 steps and we wanted to quickly recap and give you the key takeaways of today. So step 1 was define your strategic target audiences and tailor your EVP to each audience. Step 2, create content for every target audience. Step 3, research who your target audience is and where they are active online. Step 4, bring all the above together and create a plan based on the AIDA funnel. And 5, our favorite, without measure, no pleasure. Now, let's move on to the Q&A of this webinar. As mentioned before, we will try to answer as many questions as possible. If you do not have the right answer right away or when we run out of time, you will make sure you get the answers on the remaining questions in your mailbox. So let's have a look at the questions of today.
Yeah, we will give you guys a bit of time to get some questions in. So we see already some popping up. So we'll wait a bit more. Okay, I've got one question right here. The question was about slide 4. This was really about bringing it all together. So it was the whole plan. So I will get back to the slide so I can everybody knows that what we're talking about. So the question is, so if this is only basically for one target audience, and if you're not able to create one plan for multiple audiences, I think it's a good question because it looks like a lot of work. The thing is, target audiences really have different channels where they're active. For instance, an IT person is on completely different channels than a marketeer. So it's really difficult to come up with one campaign that will capture all the online behavior of these target audiences. And that's why we're seeing it's really important to really tailor them to these types of audiences. I hope this answers your question. If it doesn't, then afterwards we can always highlight a bit more how we've done this for other companies as well. Okay, I see a question popping up for step 3. Maybe Martin, you can answer this. The question is where we talk about knowing where your audiences are, that it seems quite an extensive research to do. How is the best way to start this and do this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, like mentioned during the webinar, first look at your own workforce. So talk to the people that are working in a specific department and ask them about, hey, where do you spend time online? Do you read specific blogs? Do you read specific websites? Which niche job boards are there out for that specific audience? I think that's one, it's really important. Secondly, I know there are some organizations, and I got quite some experience with Universum being an external agency that really helps with getting insights in media behavior and preferences of media consumption when looking at specific target audiences all over the globe. And the third thing I would say, look at some desk and field research, meaning just use Google as a starting point and start collecting data on websites that you think is relevant when looking at your audiences. So that's on top of my head the 3 steps that I would recommend.
Okay, we got a good question here. Who is making great recruitment content? Which organizations? I always love these types of questions. I do think it's really difficult to answer because it's quite personal. Personally, I'm a really big fan of Dropbox. I think everybody knows Dropbox. They're basically a tool that you can use to kind of share information internally, personally or within an organization. If you look on their career page, what they've done really well is they've created a kind of communication for each of their target audiences. And what they do really well is they don't speak in a way from a company perspective, but they really think about the candidate. So the way they speak to the candidates. And I think that's really amazing. Martin, do you have any companies that you think who are doing really well when it comes to recruitment content? I think Signify, that's Philip Lighting, they're doing a really good job as well. They have different videos for every target audience that they have for their most strategic audiences.
Yeah, in my opinion, if I look at the question, you can interpret it differently as well, meaning which agencies are good helping with creating content. I don't know if that's the context of the question.
No, I think it's which organizations. So it's more on who is doing a really great job right now.
Yeah,
today.
I know a Dutch organization. It's called ICT Automatisering. It's an organization in the Netherlands, and they got a really great career page. They got a really good measurability, and they got great content for all their audiences to be found on their career page. So I would definitely recommend to check it out. Their website is ict.eu. So that's a good one. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions, guys?
Also looking at the time, I think we can wrap it up. If there are any other questions, you can always try and reach out to us. Love to talk afterwards. Hope it was helpful. I'm going to give the word to Rinske now to...
Thank you, Martin and Esther, for answering all those questions. That was the last question of today. So yeah, of course, feel free to send us an email if you'd like to know more about EVP's employer branding or about any other recruitment challenge you may have. For now, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and taking the time to attend the webinar. Thank you and have a great day.